Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 24 of The Only Way is Ethics. I'd like to introduce everybody to Sascha Mullen. Thank you, Sascha, ever so much for taking the time to come and join us. Been really looking forward to this and to getting you on. I know it's taken a while, but you're a busy man, and we've got lots to talk about as well. Few posts that have gone out from yourself recently about your journey, and we'll go into more detail about that. So thank you to the audience for joining us and listening. As you all know, you can find us on YouTube and Spotify, and this is our next weekly installment. So what I'd like to do is hand over to you, Sascha, so you can just introduce yourself, just give us a bit of your clinical background and your journey into digital health, and then we'll get into a bit deeper into some questions.
Yeah, sounds great. No, thanks for having me. So yeah, my name's Sascha Mullen, currently the CNIO of Frimley Health. But my journey began like 25 years ago. I basically applied for my nurse training. I had nothing else to do. I was stuck for what I wanted to do at university. So I thought, well, I could do nursing. I could give it a crack. And that's what I did. I applied and got in. And I started my nurse training in a market town called Kings Lynn in 2000. Did my nurse training, absolutely loved it. No digital at the time. I think everything was paper back then, so I didn't have much of an interest in digital. So I don't think it actually existed that I was aware of back then. And then moved to London when I qualified, and then worked at a couple of trusts within London, and kind of moved around every couple of years. Because as I started progressing within my career, I was seeking opportunity. So I did some time in orthopedics at the Southwest London Elective Orthopedic Centre, did that for a couple of years, and then moved over to St George's, where I worked in the ED for a little while, and then worked within endoscopy. And then I kind of sort of hopped with jobs slightly in that time. I was kind of looking for sort of the next step within my career. And EPRs and systems were starting to be utilised in some organisations, and it got to the point where I was like, I'm not really sure what I want to do anymore. And I was kind of thinking, well, if I can't find the next job that's really going to interest me, I'm actually going to not do nursing anymore. And that was actually a reality.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was one of those things where I'd kind of been in sort of for about 10, 15 years, and I was struggling a little bit. And then we were having a child, and then a health visitor came along and said, oh, have you ever thought about health visiting? I was like, well, what's health visiting? And we had a really good conversation. It kind of took over from my wife's antenatal appointment, actually. I was kind of going, oh, tell me more. And they were telling me all about, what health visiting is and how, they like to reach out to or people that are having a baby. And I kind of thought, I'll give it a go. And I did my training locally for that, became a health visitor. And that's kind of when I started getting into digital, because within the health visiting service, we had an EPR. We were looking at launching an app across the community for our clients to kind of have a bit of sort of say on their care and actually have access to their child's records. And that's kind of where I kind of started getting into it. And I did that for a couple of years, and then NHS England hadn't had an opportunity for somebody to join the NHS app team. I did think, oh God, I don't think I have the right skills for that. I've had some digital interest, at home, very digital, everything connects to everything, everything talks to everything. But at work, there was that disconnect, with digital. So I threw my hat into the ring, and I was successful and worked on the NHS app with NHS England, which was really good. And then I fell into clinical safety. And when I say
fell into clinical safety, yeah.
I know, and it was part of sort of my induction. And as I was doing it, I was like, oh, do you know what? This is really starting to interest me. And as I did more training and as I sort of got my teeth into clinical safety, that's where I kind of knew there's a calling, digital and patient and clinical safety. So I did that for a little while, and then fast forward, now CNIO here at Frimley Health, which has kind of taken all that experience, that clinical experience, sort of the digital experience, but also the life experience, which has all kind of come together to who I am today.
No, thank you for that, Sasha. And that's no, that's really good. And it's something like obviously like we know each other and have for a while. And it's really interesting because I didn't actually know that you had been a health visitor. So there you go. We
Yeah,
learned
10
something.
years.
We learned
Yeah,
something
10 years in
new.
total. Yeah, absolutely loved it.
Yeah,
Completely different.
yeah,
It's completely different, sort of, working in a hospital and other community services, because, it's the 0 to 5 element. And actually, people are not generally unwell. So the service is very, very different. I think that's where, digital is really key. So to support people to sort of access records, to access information, because the journey of parenthood, it can be quite lonely, and and having access to sort of information that's almost verified is really important, because you can go on search engines and you can type in, what's wrong with my child or what's wrong with this, and you'll then get a massive list, and that then gives you a lot of panic and anxiety and can actually make things worse. So actually having a trusted
yeah.
source that's digital, that's kind of curated and owned and sort of NHS approved, is really what a lot of services need.
No, absolutely. And it'll be really interesting for us to sort of like to pick up on that sort of like maybe a bit later in our conversation, because sort of obviously, you being exposed to that whole sort of like, primary care sort of like experience in with respect to health visiting and the whole clinical safety piece as well. But what I'd like to do is sort of like, so now that's a great journey, very varied as well, which is absolutely fantastic. And as we know, is is key really for sort of like, and really assists in that whole clinical risk management piece, and that, that broadness and breadth and depth of experience, from sort of like you say, orthopedics, ED, endoscopy, health visiting, etc. It just adds value, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Where it's needed. But now CNIO.
I know.
So a big role and a big step in relation to sort of like to what you're doing. And seeing recently you sort of like telling everyone about that whole journey. So you said on your last post around sort of like you didn't have a fixed roadmap or sort of like a plan as such. And how has that sort of like shaped your early months when you first came into that role, and sort of like giving you some in those early months, trying to get that clarity about what direction you were going to sort of take that role?
Yeah, do you know, it's a really good question. So when I saw the role being advertised, we all get it, don't we? We always get that, or have I got what it takes to be in that role? And I wear my heart on my sleeve. So for those that do sort of follow my journey on LinkedIn, before I post things, I always think, oh, should I, shouldn't I? And actually, I absolutely should, because there are
Yeah, totally.
lots of people who are having the same thoughts. Lots of people have reached out to me saying, oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing your journey. And I think, when I got the role, and I kind of thought to myself, okay, so I know what the role is. I've seen other CNIOs. I know of other CNIOs. I've got connections with CNIOs. And I thought to myself, but what is my plan here? Have I got a plan? And actually, to be honest with you, no, I didn't have a plan in the beginning. And that's okay. That's absolutely fine. Because when you're going into a new organization, a bigger organization, and you're stepping into into a role that is outside your comfort zone, then I think it's okay to stand back and actually see what's going on in front of you. And that whole, people always say, oh, well, you're not new anymore. I was like, well, when are you never new? When can I use that card till? I mean, I still use it now sometimes. I go, I'm not entirely sure, or, but I find that not having a roadmap means that I can delve into areas that, somebody with a roadmap may not do, because they may think, oh, that's not my job. And I can ask those silly questions, or I can get involved in things that I need to, or actually get involved in things I don't need to, or actually don't get involved in the things I need to, because actually I think there's sometimes a risk that somebody new coming in can actually set things back. So it's been a journey of trying to understand kind of where I sit and where I fit, but at the same time I'm building a roadmap and a journey, because we can take our predecessors, roadmap and have a look at that and go, yeah, we'll just follow this. It's continuity, it's great. But actually that in itself can sometimes not be the best option, because if I was to pick up a playbook from somebody else, then actually there's no fresh eyes, there's no different thinking. And, I'm very different from any other of my colleagues that I work with, past and sort of present. So actually having no sort of roadmap in the beginning, I think is absolutely fine. It's uncomfortable. Don't get me wrong. I think sometimes I sit there and I go, oh, what should I do next? But I go, actually, what I'm about to do next, or where I position myself next, will inform the next part of the journey. And, it's not a marathon, at all. It's a gentle walk, I think, on this journey. Because if I sprint too fast, I think I miss some really important steps. And I then could potentially miss some really important parts of the journey that I really needed to kind of absorb or kind of understand, or at least just reflect on, because I'm a huge reflector, for those that have seen any of my stuff, and I do it verbally as well. I think as a nurse, always reflecting, that's not always a good thing. I think there are some disbenefits to being a reflector. It means that you're always doubting yourself, or you're always thinking, oh gosh, should I have done that? But I think it's about doing it with conviction and actually being comfortable with it. Do you know what? Yes, that was the right thing I should have done. And I think this is where not having a complete roadmap and playbook helps, because I can make those decisions, but also if I don't get them right, that's okay too. I'm only human, I make mistakes. I'll own my mistakes. But I think, for the listeners, I think, I don't think there is anything wrong with going into something without having that roadmap to start with, because the roadmap will present itself or shape itself. And like any road, you can build junctions. As cliche as that sounds, you don't have to follow the one direction. You can go off in any. And my career path has shown that. I've gone from working in acute hospitals, then into community. I forgot to mention I also worked in the ambulance service as well on triage. I did that as well for a little while. But they're all different. When you go, oh gosh, there's no pattern here. Well, that's okay. There doesn't need to be a pattern.
You haven't been a fireman and a police officer as
well,
I
haven't. No, sadly, I don't have the physique for a fireman.
In your time. Do you know what? You're absolutely right. And sort of like when you say not having a plan, and sort of like, again, it's all about, standing by your conviction. And when you say about being reflective, it's something that I used to be quite bad at, is that whole reflection piece, and just ploughing on, and not actually taking time to just sort of like, to just sort of like sit back, reflect. But I do now. I do a hell of a lot. Do you feel within your role as sort of like, now you've got this role at CNIO, I think that whole reflection piece is really important, isn't it, in relation to the wider team, because you've now taken on this position, and it can, I think sometimes from my experience, and sort of like, having CNIOs as guests on the podcast over the past year or so, and seeing what's out there on LinkedIn, there can be a perception that these roles are a bit stuffy, a bit boardroom like, box ticking, it's got chief in front of the title, it's one of the C-suite roles, etc. But how do you bring to it sort of, what is it you've brought to that role that's really facing that challenge? You've got, clinical, digital, operational teams, and you've got to try and sort of be the linchpin, haven't you? And sort of like the communicator in relation to, and that connection between all of those, and try and bring them all together. That's not an easy job, is it, in relation to what you do?
No, not really. And that's a really interesting one, because you always hear the phrase of, people wearing different hats in their role. And I think absolutely, we as CNIO absolutely do wear different hats. But for what I think I bring to the role, good question. I think being approachable. So from day one of my missions was to be absolutely visible. And I remember during my interview, was like, what do you think you can bring? I think the presentation that I had to do was around what do you see as the role of CNIO, and what are your qualities? What will you bring to the role? And that was good in itself as a reflective piece, because actually I thought back and I thought, let me think back to all of the managers I've had, and let me think back to all the experiences I've had, and what would I have wanted from them that they never gave? And I kind of did that from sort of looking back over the years, and I thought visibility is up there. Visibility is absolutely needed from a leader, somebody who's willing to roll up their sleeves and ask those difficult questions, and also listen. I think it's not just about me talking to people, it's about listening. So visibility, listening, and almost feeling part of the team. Like you say, you mentioned, there's that connotation of it being quite stuffy and sort of boardroom like, and it's got chief in the title. Strip all that away. I'm a nurse. I trained as a nurse. I've been a nurse for 25 years. Stick a rock, cut me in half, it will say nurse all the way through. Well, it'll also say and CSO now, because I think that's what's coming through. But that's me through and through. And I think it's having that compassionate approach, and that, I don't know, I think I've just taken a lot of stuff from previous leaders, the good stuff, the not so good stuff, and kind of gone, right, if I could type into like ChatGPT, what does a perfect leader look like, taking in all my experiences, and it's spitting something out and going, do you know what, I quite like that because it's understood X, Y, and Z. But putting it into practice is really difficult, because I can be me, but then I've got to remember that people are people. People come from different backgrounds, have different lived experiences. So actually I need to be adaptable. So I can't have this one approach going in and going, right, this is how I'm going to deal with it, because actually people act very differently, react very differently. And it's that whole, you can take a horse to water, absolutely. But then how do I get the best? It's not about me. It's about how do I get the best out of the people I'm working with and the people I'm interacting with. And that can be a challenge. But I hope I give off that vibe within the organization that actually, if you're a senior leader, we can have a senior conversation. If you are a nurse on the ward, we can have a nurse related question, a conversation. It's being able to kind of, we're chameleons. I think we can be many things. And I think it's making sure that we're visible with that, because I could just sit behind a desk and do stuff and not be visible. But actually, I don't think that does me any good. And I don't think that does the organization or the journey, the transformation journey the organization's going through any good either. I think it'd actually be quite a barrier if you've got leaders like that aren't visible or aren't almost listening and going back to the teams to say, look, I've heard you. This is what I want to do to help, or this is what we can do to unlock X, Y, and Z barrier.
Yeah, and I think from my experiences as well, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It's adapting, isn't it, to the different type situations and the different environments in relation to what you're doing in supporting the teams and the people that are out there. Because I know when I was sort of working in the NHS and sort of got to a senior position and came away from like the wards and the clinical areas, etc. I always felt like a bit of an outsider, as if I'd sort of, and it's difficult sometimes, isn't it, to sort of like, try and get that out of your head. And like you said, if you strip it down, and I'm exactly like you, Sascha, in that respect, I've got nurse running through me, sort of like, if I'm in the street and I see something, I'm there, I'm helping, sort of like, and some Sleeves of the people around you find that a bit odd sometimes. Why are you getting involved or something? I've had people saying to me sort of like, why do you need to get involved? Let someone else deal with it, or something like that. Or, they've got people around them and stuff. And it's like, it's like, no, I'll never, and that will never go.
Yeah.
That's not sort of like in that respect. And I suppose it's like sort of, even as a sort of like, CNIO and sort of, in that role, it's really important, isn't it, to stay grounded and to roll your sleeves up and to be out there, because unfortunately, a bit sort of emotive here, I don't think all CNIOs actually do that, in my experience, and it is a shame. I think all CNIOs should be there are lots of them out there that, I don't know, they've got agendas to sort of like fulfill and stuff like that, and they're just a face. And audience, people are probably going to shoot me down. And please, like, sort of, bring in your comments and stuff like that, and disagree with me if you want to. But I think you're absolutely right. You're front and center. You're there. You're supporting sort of like teams, and it's absolutely key to be successful. People are looking to yourselves, aren't they, for direction? People are looking for you to be able to steer them, to support them, to lead them, to to be there, to be able to show them some sort of direction in relation to that.
Yeah, and that's why it's always been key for me from the very start, is to show them who I am, my authentic self. Because when people start a new job, sometimes it's you kind of, you want to make an impression, don't you? Absolutely, you do. But I think if you can make an impression, but by being yourself at the same time. So one of the things that I kind of thought about, just go back onto your there's 2 points actually. The first point on let someone else deal with it, that kind of attitude. The problem is, if we let somebody else deal with it every time, nothing gets done, because things come in sort of fits and starts. Certainly sometimes we get a lot of engagement at the very beginning, a lot of energy. We get it to a point, then it stalls, and then it kind of falls on the back burner, and then somebody comes in, and then if I feel like I'm stepping on toes, I'm like, okay, look, guys, I hope I'm not stepping on any toes, but what can I do to help you guys get you to the next step? Because from my observation, you're stuck here. You tell me. And it's kind of working with them, because as a CNIO, it isn't about me and my agenda. I don't have an agenda. I want to ensure that, the organization is transforming. We've got a great ambition to be, one of the top 10 digitally mature trusts, and have all our systems working and talking to each other and having all that. But it's about the people. It's not about me. It's about the people that are doing the doing. I see myself as a facilitator, an advocate, almost like a subject matter expert to support them on that journey. And honestly, in my opinion, is not to take the credit for that. It's about saying, no, you did that. I was just a small cog in this big machine that has got you to that point. So yeah, it is an interesting one. And when I started, I didn't have, I went to work in my trousers and my shirt with a lanyard round, on a ward with my notepad. I thought to myself, oh gosh, this is a weird experience. They're asking me about passwords resets and all that kind of stuff, and I'm the IT guy. And I thought, I'm going to struggle to really explain what it is I do unless I do that from the very beginning. So I had a couple of those experiences. I felt like, this is actually going to be a barrier for me. So I went away and I had a look at what we had internally, and I thought, well, we don't have an internal website about what our team does and what I do. So let's get that done. So we've curated something with some FAQs and a bit of background around clinical informatics and clinical safety. I've done a couple of kind of comms pieces with the trust to say, look, CNIO, this is my role. Come and have a chat, that kind of stuff. And then I thought, actually, it's time to order a uniform. Not been in uniform for years. Not going to say I look good in a uniform. I don't. I thought, actually, just having that uniform denotes to people that I am one of them, and actually I'm a safe person to talk to. Because going around in just a shirt, you don't know who I am. And actually, I can tell you I work with clinical informatics. Actually, they don't get anything out of that conversation.
Yeah.
So actually, when they see that and see that I'm CNIO, they might ask me what CNIO is, and I'll give them a quick thing about it and signpost them. But it's about, look, if you see me about, collar me in the corridor, meet me via Teams, meet me in the canteen for a cup of coffee, invite me out to your teams to meet your team. So I think in the last sort of 6 months, or 200 days on Thursday of this week, I have been making it a mission at least once a week at the moment to go out and meet clinical teams. And by clinical teams, I don't mean just the senior leadership. I mean everybody within those clinical teams. Everyone. I think it's super important to do that. And I've also got an amazing team that I work with in clinical informatics. And, we've had conversations, and we're all now sporting the new uniform. And actually, when we go out, it's about them almost promoting the brand of clinical informatics, because actually there's a lot of information and data out there within all our systems that we use. If we use it right, we can make some real change within the way we deliver healthcare and make things safer. So we want our teams on the ground to know that if you keep thinking that you're just putting that data into an EPR for the sake of it, let us explain to you why and what that means downstream or upstream, rather than it being that tick box exercise. And I think it's really important that if we're putting things into a system, we need to understand why. And I see that as one of my sort of hats, is to go, all that work you're putting into the system, let me tell you why you're doing that. It might be obvious. We're documenting care. It's about keeping the patient safe. Yes, absolutely, absolutely it is. But that information you're putting in, did you know it goes off to this GP? It goes into the app that they've got. It goes off to NHS app, all this. It's getting them to understand that digital journey of the information they're putting in. Because I've got the app. I've got an app. I see my health records from my GP online. I understand that. Yet my family members don't. So actually just giving them a bit of intel around that gets them a little bit more engaged with it, but also it unlocks it for them. They start using it in the way it was intended, rather than, oh, just another thing. And that's why I've always said that, you know, it's about the people on the ground. And you know, when you read, you know, the bits I've put on, it's about me making sure that the people I go to, they are really important to me, and I need to hear from them. I'm not seeing patients for 12-hour shifts, you know, from 7 in the morning to 7 in the evening. I don't know the nuances that they might have with using some of the technology and some of the kit. I hear stuff on the grapevine. If I hear it, I then go out on my way to say, I've heard these cohort of staff talking about X, Y, and Z. Let's go in and feel it for ourselves. And sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm like, oh, did you not know that could be fixed by just doing this? Or, oh my gosh, we need to fix this because actually this is really impacting clinical care. It's a real tough one to balance, it really is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what you've just, you know, you've just spoken about those whole experiences as, you know, in your role and getting out there to the teams, being on the sort of like on the ground. And I think what you've identified and you've also conveyed within your post is this whole sort of like, you know, so we're talking specifically about Frimley and like the Frimley factor. The sort of
Frimley factor, yeah,
you know, the sort of unique culture, this can-do sort of like energy and this attitude, which is fantastic. That you know that's what you've noticed from that organisation, and sort of, and obviously has helped you obviously greatly within your role. And yeah, it'd be good for you to sort of like, you know, talk about your experiences in relation to that.
Yeah, so if I go back to day one. New role, rock up, nicely ironed shirt, trousers with a nice crease in them. You know how it is, first day vibes and all that. And then you think to yourself, oh my gosh, you know, what have I done? What happens if I've gone into an organisation where everybody's kind of keeps themselves to themselves and actually, you know, you're the new boy, you know, you've come in, you want to change everything. I think that's the fear sometimes with new leadership, is that we're at a point where we're managing, somebody new comes in, they're going to change it all on its head. Well, that hasn't actually happened, thankfully, because I've gone in and I've listened to my staff and the teams out there, and I've said, well, you tell me, what could you change? If a new person like me's come in, you were to tell me one thing that's really bothering you, tell me, and how would you change it? So having those conversations has kind of really been enlightening, because actually they've gone, well, we would change this, but it's okay because I've spoken to so-and-so and so-and-so, and they've spoken to the EPR team and they've already done it, or it's in flight. So I'm like, wow, actually everybody I've spoken to, everything that they're thinking of wanting to change, it's already in flight. The only barriers might be a few blockers, but we get blockers with everything, you know. So I've just gone to people saying, you know, like, I'm really stuck with this. I don't know where to take it. I know it's not your job, but do you mind just telling me? And everybody's just gone, absolutely, whack something in the diary. Let's have a 10-minute call. Or, yeah, I'll just pop down to your office and have a chat. And that's kind of on the sort of leadership support side. But on the ground, it literally is, you know, if you go into an area and there's a bit of a problem, they kind of welcome you with open arms and go, thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. We need to do this, we need to do that, we don't know how to, and we work with them. And actually I'm not used to having to own all the actions. I'm normally used to taking an action log and going, right, these 50 actions are mine. But actually, there is a culture of accountability and responsibility with almost like senior leaders taking a bit of a senior responsible officer role, an SRO role, to go, okay, we'll make sure it's working. But I find that really refreshing. Don't get me wrong, I've had it in my previous organisation, in others. But here, I don't know, it just feels very different. And I don't know what that is. I think, I couldn't put it in a bottle and sell it, because I think it's just the culture of the organisation. And just to kind of add a bit of context to that, so our organisation is not just one site. We've got 3 big hospitals and lots of community sites spread over, counties, multiple counties. And the distance between one and the other, or the 2 furthest, we're talking in the car at least an hour and a half on a good day.
Wow. Yeah.
So having that culture through 3 different big sites and across all the other small sites must have been difficult to get through. And I think that's a testament to all the work our teams have been doing over the years to kind of upskill, train staff and embed a culture that is around, that can do, living and breathing, sort of the patient care, all those kind of things. And I think it's great. And I've kind of fallen into that quite easily as an outsider before, when I first joined, but I feel very much part of it now. I felt like that I've been enabled to ask those questions and go, I know we've already done it this way. Can we just give it one more try with a little slant on it? Or we've done it 2 years ago. The world's different since then. Can we try it now? And actually, there isn't a no, we can't do that. It's a absolutely. Let's have a look. Let's prioritize it if we need to. And actually, we can put a bit of resource, a bit of scoping. Great, let's give it a go. And that's really refreshing, because otherwise it becomes stagnant as an organisation and you end up rehashing the same things. People leave, new people come in, those that have been in the organisation a long time, which Frimley has a lot of staff who have been there for years and years, which I think is great that people have stayed within an organisation. Yeah. And there's a lot of people like that, is that they're given a voice, and if they've got ideas, they can raise them, and they're supported with that.
And that's great, and it's so refreshing. But I know you said, Sascha, that you can't bottle that. You can't sort of like there's no sort of almost as a sort of like ingredient sort of like thing. However, for other organisations out there that are maybe trying to do a similar thing and trying to lift spirits, or trying to because as we know at the moment, it's difficult times, isn't it? It's difficult times. And we all know that, and we all appreciate the hard work that everyone's sort of like putting in at the moment. But is there anything from sort of like that Frimley factor that you could sort of like impart to sort of like other organisations?
It's hard to quantify something that you feel. And it's going to sound really cheesy. It sounds really cheesy. It sounds like a Hallmark card, doesn't it? But I think for me that there's a culture of listening. I think we're very good at solutionizing when there's a problem and going straight to trying to fix it. And I think there is value in that, but there is also value in stepping back. And again, Dean, going back to you and I as nurses, it's that reflection. If we're constantly making decisions and doing things without even a minute bit of reflective time, then we can either make a decision that actually wasn't the right one, or we've made a decision but didn't involve the right people. And if you start doing that, what you do is you leave people behind, and then that has an element of resentment, I think, towards an organisation. If you go, do you know what? They've just rolled this out and they didn't even ask us, this is my system. They didn't even ask us. And I think what they're very good at is making sure that communications and the way that they kind of get information out to staff is really good. We've got regular comms twice a week. We've got bulletins that come out from sort of digital services. We've got lots of things that come out that we can read in our own time. They're not mandated, they're not forced, but actually people do want to read them because they're bite-sized. We can do it in between meetings. We can do it maybe in, if you're a nurse on a shift, you could do it in between, on a break or something. And because it's so bite-sized, it gives you sort of a snapshot, and then you can go in and look at it later, deeper if you want to. But I think it's having that openness and transparency as an organisation as to your direction, what you're doing, what's working well, what needs to be improved. I think, and that goes for all organisations, if you could be open and honest with your staff, then I think you've already won them over, because they know they're not going to get blindsided and they're not going to have the rug pulled from under their feet. And it increases that trust level between staff and organisation. And then you have good staff retention then. And then, people love coming to work and people enjoy coming to work. At the end of the day, we come to work to look after our patients, to keep our patients safe and do the best we can with the tools and resources we've got, which I know in today's climate is difficult. But I don't hear many people moaning about that, because we are who we are. We're not nurses because, it's a job. We are nurses because that is it. It is in our DNA. And when I say nurses, I also mean all the other professions as well. I mean, it's not particularly totally. So, totally. But yeah, I'm quite passionate about sort of making sure people are heard and people are open and honest as a whole, because that cascade of truth that comes down is just refreshing.
So with that, you come into an organisation, and I think it's really positive that you're going out there this sort of like can-do attitude, and people are really sort of like receptive. And I think, as you picked up on as well, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because we are very reactive, aren't we? We're very knee-jerk in relation to the NHS, and you're right, we can fall into this trap, can't we, of just trying to plough forward without actually saying, whoa, hang on a second, let's sit, let's reflect, let's have a proper sort of like look at what we're doing, especially when, obviously, so you've come into an organisation and there's obviously sort of like, projects that are, new projects, there's projects that are halfway through, there's projects that are coming to an end, so you have to then pick these up and, find a way forward in relation to like, right, you're coming in, and like you said previously, you have to make decisions of whether to get totally involved, sit as a helicopter view or step back, etc. So what's that experience been like in relation to picking up, and what sort of projects have you got sort of like at the moment that are sort of in play?
So it's quite an interesting one, actually, because for anybody that knows me personally, I want to get involved in everything. Absolutely everything, because anecdotally it's a little bit, not control, I don't like that word, but it's about absolutely. But I think this role has really helped me to kind of look at myself and go, I don't actually need to be involved in this. It's like the racy matrix. I need to be informed on this bit. I need to be aware of it, because if something happens down the line, I can say, yeah, I knew about that. Don't worry about it. There are some times where I want to get involved, but again, I resist that, because it's like a child who is crawling, trying to stand up and walk. You don't want to pick the child up, put them on their feet and go, yeah, they're walking. You want them to do it themselves, because it's about learning. It's about that cycle. They make their mistakes, they fall over, they give it another go, they go, I'm not going to hold this table now, I'm going to do it this way, and then they end up standing up and walking. And I'm not likening sort of people like that as babies trying to walk, but it's the analogy of, if I come in and take it off somebody, if a manager did that to me, I'd be like, well, what are you doing? You're micromanaging me now, you don't trust me. Whereas what I would do is I would observe, and I would ask the question, to the team or whatever separately, and go, that sounds really great. Do you need me for anything? I'm happy if you do. Equally, I'm happy if you don't. And as I've done that throughout the last 6 months, there are lots of projects, lots of things. Everything is a high priority in today's world. And I think it's about, well, what do I do? Where am I light touch? Where am I fully involved? This is where clinical safety comes in. So for me, it's about having that I saw you smile there. It's about having that structure to go, I've got 100 things. Let's quickly look at those 100 things, figure out which one needs all of my attention, which needs some, which I wouldn't say needs none, because I think it still needs some, but then that falls into legacy. And I think that's a whole new podcast if we talk about legacy. But I think for me, I've always been the quote I've always used in training is that some form of clinical safety and risk management is better than none. And I think that's how I kind of, that teaching and learning that I've done in the 4 or 5 years of being a CSO, it's kind of become my thinking process in everything I do. And it's really weird because you almost approach every problem, every scenario with almost that clinical risk hazard assessment kind of thinking and thought process. So somebody will come to me with a problem and they go, oh, there's a clinical risk. And my question is, articulate that risk for me. And then I'm thinking about, right, okay, so that's the problem. Okay, we need to do that. Okay, that's how big it is. Oh, I don't need to do anything. Or, oh, actually, I need to do it a lot. So I kind of use that in my approach and thinking. And I think I use that as a way of almost prioritizing my work. It's almost like I've had some free project management training as part of the hazard assessment stuff, because it is that, isn't it? You're prioritizing and looking at risk all the time when you come to clinical safety. But actually, you don't. Totally. In anything we do, nurses, midwives, HPs, any job, we're always looking at risk, but we just don't know that's what it's called. We're always, when we look at a patient, first day, we're going, hi, Mr. Jones, the minute we walk in and look at them, we are risk assessing.
Eyeballing, aren't you? You are. You're eyeballing.
We don't rule it out. We're doing it as a thing that we just know to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm glad you've come on. You said, like, you saw me smile. Obviously, like, we're both CSOs, and absolutely. Sort of like, the whole digital clinical safety piece. And I think it's really good having you on this episode, Sascha, because it'd be really interesting. We will get onto that whole sort of like, not treating digital clinical safety as a tick box exercise, and it being lived and breathed, which we bang that drum continuously. But how have you found that transition? So, you're a CNIO now. Your role has changed. You've got lots of responsibilities, as you've spoken about. However, you are still a clinical safety officer. But what does that mean to you now in relation to being a CNIO? Because obviously you can't give as much attention to sort of like those projects. And how does that work for you?
If I'm honest, won't come as any surprise to a CSO, I'm sure. I do have sleepless nights over clinical safety sometimes, because when you've been in it as long as I have, or even longer, there is always that potential, always. And I think on the first sort of month or so as CSO, I was very focused on clinical safety. That was kind of where I was always thinking and always doing. And as the work started shifting and I was getting to understand the role and my direction was changing, I felt myself being pulled away. Now, having a CNIO and CSO for an organization in the same role, we know it happens everywhere, but we know it's not practical because I cannot give it the credit that it deserves. So I've had to think very differently. So we had a form of clinical safety within the organization. So it was looking at where were we? It was it's quite interesting, actually. I'm digressing in my own head now. Whenever a clinical safety assessment is done, we know that even though it's been done, if a new CSO comes into an organization, we should be reviewing that assessment. Sorry, hang on. We should be reviewing that assessment and just giving our opinion on it and maybe reassessing, because we're going on the words of somebody else, so we have to do that. So we've done that. And the more I delved into it, the more I thought, actually, I can't do this on my role, as a CNIO as well. And I know there are other CNIOs that are in the same boat. But this also applies for nurses or any other qualified professional who is a CSO on top of their actual role. There's a lot of pressure on us to be able to meet the mandated standards. Now, That's impossible when you've got it as a dual role, but there's no funding anywhere across the NHS to have dedicated roles. You might be lucky to have them in some organisations, but it isn't common practice. So what I've done, I've had to think about it very pragmatically, thinking, what would help me sleep better at night? And for that, it's about looking at a quick, short assessment on systems that are out of support, or systems that are legacy, or systems that have had nothing, going out to the system owner and saying, please, can you complete this very quick and dirty form where you will tell me about the system, why you use it, how you use it. You know, have you got a DPIA? Do you know about a DTAC? Do you know about a DCB 0129 for it? They definitely don't have an 0160, because I wouldn't send it to them otherwise, looking at our repository. And then we send that out, and it comes back to me as the CSO. And to add to that, they'll do a mini hazard workshop within their service. So we will say to them, we'll give you one. The biggest one for us as an organisation, let's say Wi-Fi. We know that's we're dependent on Wi-Fi pretty much everywhere. So we've written that one out for you, the possible causes and what the risk is for any. You then put a score on it based on your system. They'll come back to me as CSO, and I will look at it and I'll go, this is actually low risk, low impact, because the mitigations are, it's used for this, the number of patients it affects is 5, and we've got a reporting system in place, we've got a patient incident review group in place, so God forbid anything goes wrong, we've got a governance route to take it down. I will then file that on a spreadsheet that says, I've done a quick review, no further action, or I look at it and go, wow, didn't know this existed. That's pretty important. I need to now put that in it needs a proper end-to-end clinical risk assessment. So I add it to that list. Problem is, for every one bit of technology we try and get at the end where we've not done anything, 5 to 10 are onboarding at the other end of that the spectrum. And it's like, oh my God, what do I do? But I think that's okay. And this is my own opinion. I think that's okay. As long as you are showing willing with the resources you've got, the expertise around you, if you can show some form of clinical risk management, and that doesn't mean following a template or spreadsheet. Sometimes I attend meetings where the project has its own risk and issue log. They've got this, they've got a testing platform, and I think that's everything the DCB standard wants. It's just not written in one document. So how can I utilize that? And I think that's okay to do that until we live in a world where we have 150 CSOs per organisation with a dedicated time, and we can do that. But it does worry me. Do you not have that then, Sascha? 150. We're quite sure of that. The other thing is as well is that I'm fortunate enough to have been part of the NHSE Train the Trainer. What that means for the future, we'll wait and see. But what that does mean is that coming into this organisation, I found 6 CSOs in the organisation when I joined. Wow. Amazing. I know, absolutely amazing. So within the first month, I got them all into a room and we did a recap and we did a bit of a refresh. Yeah. The key to anybody that's listening, I could go on, yeah. Dean, shut me up if you want to. No. The key thing here is that if you've got CSOs trained within your organisation, please help them get one clinical safety case and hazard log over the line. Once they've done the first one, they'll have a template or an exemplar that they could use, but it gives them the confidence. Because my first one was the most nerve-wracking one ever. Once I did it and then used the NHSE benchmarking tool, I was like, do you know what? There's a bit of room for improvement. So I went out and I asked industry. I asked, NHS, can I have a look at a couple? I was like, I like how this supplier has written that. I'm going to look at that and I'm going to do something similar. Obviously, I can't copy it because it's not mine. Other NHS organisations I've looked at and gone, oh, they're missing something. Oh, I don't mean to be, teaching to suck eggs, but you might want to put this in. This is why, this is why I put it in. So with my group of CSOs, I'm now finding these systems that I need to do. They're legacy, so the need isn't urgent in the sense of there's no go live date, but there is an urgency for them because they are live systems, of course. But what I'm saying is, why don't we work on this together? You be the CSO, I will then take it through the governance route that we've established, and actually let's get you through your first one. Because if you can do your first one, it will give you that confidence to then go out and look for safety case work rather than I've not done one yet. I've not done one yet. And
Absolutely. And it's sorry to sort of like, you know,
I'm starting to get passionate now.
And it's no, and it is, and it's absolutely fantastic, and it's what it's all about, Sascha. And you know, I'm a big advocate in sort of like, you know, not reinventing the wheel. If there is sort of like, you know, we within the NHS with, you know, big promoters of what good looks like, why can't we get to the point with clinical risk management? Look, we know it's not rocket science, what you've just explained, and it's all about an evidence base, isn't it? And for me, my 3 pillars that I train on is and is sort of like, you know, is that reason, safety argument, safety claims, better have the evidence to back it up. Weak evidence, weak argument, strong evidence, strong argument. Yeah, absolutely. In relation to that, and if you stick by a foundation or a guide in relation to that, and a safety case report, you know, a hazard log, a safety case report, a clinical risk management plan, we should be able to get to the point. And I know we have as an organisation, and that's not what this is about. But like, you know, but just to tell everyone is that, you know, and it's taken 18 years. You know, I've been a CSO since 2008, so 17 years. You know, it's taken all that time, a lot of that time. I'm not saying all of it, to get to a point to say, you know, I'm really happy now with these templates and with these that they've got pretty much everything in. And if it's structured, why does the structure have to? You know, people I've seen in my experience over however many years, people changing, continuously changing the structure and the format, and it's like, why are we sort of like, you know, doing that? It should be consistent, because surely, in relation.
It should be, and this is no reflection on NHS England. It's no reflection on anybody. But
no.
When you put out some guidance, the problem with guidance is that it's only as good as at the time you wrote it. We know that the DCD standards are going through a review.
We know, and it's lacking.
Yeah. But every organisation does things differently, and that's okay as well. Absolutely is okay. As a CSO, though, what you can't have is 2 safety cases that are structured differently for different projects. I think you do need to have that one template that goes through for an organisation. So you can't have one that misses something out and one that adds something. It has to be the same. So I think once you, as an organisation, so in my previous trust, it took me 18 months to get all that sorted. Now, I brought that experience here, but again, it doesn't fit the same mould because we are different in a different organisation. So I've made some tweaks here and there, but actually it's that whole, if I can get a couple of others just to do 1 or 2 safety cases themselves, as CNIO, I inadvertently create a governance structure, because as CSOs, they can work with project leads and project managers. By the way, they should so be on the training. Just because the training says, you know, to be a CSO, you need to be part of a registering body. Project managers, analysts, they are the right people to
integration, infrastructure,
absolutely.
All of those, and we are finding a lot more. And I was going to talk about this when you were chatting around like the whole team. Is that what I'm seeing from delivering sort of like training to a number of NHS trusts recently, and we're going to be up in Mid Mersey Digital Alliance soon as well, is that they are bringing, Sascha, a whole team.
Yeah.
Whereas, and this is new because if I went back to just before Christmas, all I was seeing were organisations would just dump me in front of a load of clinicians. And I was like, well, that's fine, but where's the rest of the team? Those guys go back to their day jobs. They have very little exposure to clinical risk management, and they're not passing on.
Yeah.
They're not passing any of that. There's no knowledge transfer in relation to that. And it's really frustrating.
It is frustrating. And what I would love for the listeners of this podcast to do is either in the comments or in any other forums is to, if you're a CSO, let us know how many safety cases you've written. Actually, no, let me rephrase that. as a CSO, let us know if you have not yet had an opportunity to undertake a clinical risk assessment through, doing a safety case. Because I wonder whether the barrier is organizational because the governance isn't really there. It's that we need a CSO, but actually there's no package around that. It's a lone person having to make it up. Because there are networks out there that can help support you. And you're right about this whole issue around consistency. How many times do we see, has anybody got a safety case for X, Y, and Z? Can we have a look and share? Absolutely. Why are we not doing that? Again, the implementation bit, the actual hazard log is always unique to an organization because it's how you implement it. But actually, why are we writing the same safety case 900 times if we're all using similar systems? But I think there's still that issue of, well, it's really hard to explain. There's that issue of, I'm a CSO, I've got this big job to do. And for a lot of people, and it was like this for me when I first started out 4 years ago, it's in the too difficult bucket. So let's do the quick ones. But actually, the quick ones write themselves because they're low risk potentially. It's the ones that are really complicated where if you say, don't worry, I'll do this safety case for the EPR, you can't do it on your own. And actually,
it's a team effort. Yeah.
Absolutely. So
total team effort.
Where does it say that a CSO or a registrant has to write every word in a safety case?
Exactly. Well, and I train this, Sascha, on the course, and I say, like, and I'm a big advocate, and sort of like, we trained last week. I did some awareness sessions in Kidderminster as well, and I said, you guys, and it's great because the awareness sessions I did, there were no clinicians there, none. It was all project. It was all project team. It's PSOs, project managers. It was directors. It was, and I said, please support your CSOs. Please to all work as a team because I'd previously trained the clinical and those guys there as well. So I said, you all know, and you can all now talk to each other. You can all collaborate, and they are. It's really positive up there, actually, and I'm really I've been really impressed with their approach and their attitude. They're another organisation with that can-do sort of approach.
It'd be good to get a case study from them, like a one-page case study, because I think that'd be really good to share.
This is what we're looking to do with some of these initiatives, and I think it's something, Sascha, we can take forward to. You said about asking the questions about CSOs and how many clinical safety case reports have they done, etc. Why don't we pick that up? I think the place, we could pick it up on the coffee and chat, or pick it up or sort of move something forward, put something out with the CSO Council and sort of stuff like that. We really need to, because as we know, Sascha, we're the only ones that are going to drive this and move this forward. God bless them. NHSE at the moment, they're struggling. It's a small team. There's not that impetus there, is there? There's not that drive. There's not that, because it's just not. Look, and we can talk about the whole NHS sort of being abolished and stuff like that. It absolutely scares the bejeebers out of me at the moment, because I'm just worried. The whole regulatory space at the moment is in flux, and on top of that, NHSE being in flux just does not help the situation. And I think there's a lot of people out there in the sector, because I've spoken to a lot of them, that come to me and say, what's going on, or what do you think is going to be the sort of the direction we're going to go in, etc.
Sorry to cut over you there.
No, go on.
I think that's great. I think absolutely what's going on is scares the bejesus out of me as well, because obviously you said you've been a CSO for 17 years. I didn't even know CSOs existed until I started being one. I never heard of it before. I hold on. This is probably where my positivity comes in. I hold on to a glimmer of hope that when you think about the Department of Health and Social Care, NHS England, all those regulatory bodies, it's all about patient safety, keeping patients safe, keeping staff safe, having safe systems. I would hope this is one of the kind of agnostic things that gets brought over to whatever the new entity looks like as a priority, because it's mandated in the Health and Social Care Act. For them to say we're not doing it any longer, don't they have to change the law?
But it's mandated under the Health and Social Care Act, as we know. However, we also know, and I've spoken about this until I'm sort of blue in the face around sort of like, the comparisons with the ICO, MHRA, National Cyber Security. See, there's weight that sits behind those, whereas 129 and 160, as we know, Sascha, there is no weight that sits behind it. So if there's no one banging the drum to say you must and you will, otherwise there are penalties. And look, and we've had discussions, haven't we, on lots of different forums around what do those penalties look like, and people have different ideas around whether it's financial or whether there's other sort of like, I think a good one for sort of manufacturers would be to say, because you can't just say we're switching your system off, because that holds its own risk in risk.
Absolutely.
You can't do that. But what you could say to them is, you are not going live anywhere else until you sort all of this out. We are going to stop you from procuring into the NHS. And that had hit a manufacturer really hard, and they would sort their stuff out. And with, and from the 160 side of things, that, you get, it's on CQC, it's on your CQC sort of marking. And boy, would people react then if it was sort of like, in relation to that. I don't know.
I mean, it's a controversial topic. And
it is controversial. It's really
I don't know where I sit on it fully yet. I know we need to do something.
Nor do I, to be honest.
No, I know we definitely need to do something, but are we drinking from the poisoned chalice? Because if we say, yes, let's absolutely mandate it, or let's tell suppliers we're not going live, well, what's stopping a supplier saying, well, if I show you mine, show me yours? And actually, if we then say, well, we can't show you, or there are financial penalties, I wonder what impact that would have on the community. Because if somebody said to me from the 1st of September, you need to be fully up to date with all your systems, there is no way in the world that every organisation can do that.
I know there's going to have to be, isn't there? Obviously, it's like any of this. So again, when MHRA bring out new sort of like, when we move, they give a date like however long into the future, saying sort of like, we're giving you 3 years, or we're giving you sort of like, the period isn't like a short period to say, as of now, you're all in trouble.
But do you know what we need, Dean? We need financial investment for organisations. We also need to make sure the standards state, don't they? You need top leadership buy-in.
Yeah, totally.
And I wonder whether that's some type of challenge, because our top leaders across organisations know what clinical safety is, because they've seen clinical safety good, they've seen clinical safety not so good, and they've seen the result of unassessed systems. I'm sure they have. But if you had them sat during this training, hearing everything that we're doing and seeing, or would that change their mind? Should we be saying, actually, if you're a top leader, you actually need to do the training so you can understand what CSOs do, almost like mandated? Because I want to be able to go to my leaders and say, do you know what? You were on that training. I need you to unlock something for me because I can't. But the way it is at the moment, with everything that, like you say, NHSE and industry and NHS organisations, we're all doing it differently. And if I'm honest, we're all doing the best we can. And there are some amazing CSOs out there. I just don't think, after this long since the standards have been published, I just don't understand what it is that's got us to this point where we are, where we're at. Because I would have thought by sort of 2010, 2011, that kind of time, enough time would have been get the processes within the NHS. So it's mandated. Totally. Guys, this is your process. You've got to do it. Why is it coming to now where we've got people from, if we're going, let's use nursing, for example, if we're saying you need to be a registrant, you've got band 5s all the way up, banging that drum when actually it should be coming from the top down as well, where it's not, it's the bottom up. Or just not.
Sorry, no, and you're absolutely right. But I mean, you only have to look at the National Programme for IT. And I remember, like, back in showing my age now, sort of like, 2004, 2005, when there was this vision of, and everyone was saying, 2 systems, You choose one of them, and we're just going to roll it out. It's going to be as smooth as anything, and it's just going to go into place. And what's the problem and all that stuff? And well, there we, there we go in relation to that. And you would have thought that I think it was very reactive. I don't think the proactive side of those standards going in was done well. The planning was, and the foresight to say, hang on a second, is everyone just going to pick this up and run with it, or are we going to have issues? And there wasn't obviously a sort of like, what was done was there a lessons learned post sort of like, deployment of the implementation of the standards, etc. and stuff like that. But coming back to, because obviously we could wax lyrical about this for hours.
Yeah, exactly.
But with this in mind though, and coming back to your digital ambassador network, and in relation to that, we need people banging the drum. The problem we've got, we've already highlighted top management. There's an awareness issue there in relation. Don't get me wrong, they know about it. I'm not saying they don't know, but there is an issue there.
Though. Yeah, and they're
not absolutely. They're not in the weeds, but what they need to be, like you said, they need to sit on one of these like clinical risk management awareness, like half-day things that whoever does. There's lots of people out there. Or also the sort of like those people on the ground, there's an awareness thing, our general sort of like, if I walked onto a ward and said to a nurse, do you know what digital clinical safety is or digital patient safety? They'd probably go, not really, and stuff like that in the majority of organisations. So I
would love to mandate it. I would love to mandate it as part of
it needs to be part of your induction. Part of
an hour, not even an hour, 20 minutes on digital clinical safety, what your role and responsibility is, just to get that conversation started.
And also, I'm a big advocate, and I've said this on all of my training as well, is screensavers. There should be a mandated digital patient safety screensaver it should be a national one. Why can't we do a poster campaign and someone win to produce a digital patient safety screensaver that all trusts have to have, and it stays there. It's a permanent fixture. So when you see them scrolling past your screen, because, can you imagine, Sascha, if we were sat there and you go, it's that digital patient safety thing again.
Yeah.
Because you're moaning about it, you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
If you weren't, you wouldn't be thinking about it. So at least then, even if 10%, 15% of the audience say they see that go past, then they're in their system and they go, blimey, that's doing that. Oh, that's calculating that incorrectly.
Yeah.
I saw that screensaver. I need to contact because that's a risk and that could harm the patient. Then that's job done. In relation to that.
No, I think that's a great idea, and that's why I see when I went for my interview, one of the things I said is that I said I'd love to create a digital ambassador network, and they were like, well, if you get the job, then that sounds like a great project. And actually, the reason I call them digital ambassadors because I don't like the word champions. When I hear the word champion, I get feared because I remember being a nurse and you're either a leg ulcer champion or you're a this champion, you're a that champion, fluid balance champion. And actually it doesn't give the vibe that I wanted. So we've created this network where these are engaged people. And I say people in the sense of there is no role attached to it. It doesn't matter who you are in the organization. If you're employed with us, there is some form of technology you are using. And the idea is it's a peer network where actually we will use the network to support us with our journey, but at the same time, we will use our network to hear from them. And we're giving back. So it isn't a one-way street. So if they do stuff, we're going to give them access to training. We're going to get them sneak peeks at new functionality, testing environments, all that kind of stuff that I think it needs to be a bit sexy because you want to keep these champions because what you want to do, you want to get them so interested that we empower them to find a job somewhere, either internally or externally, that takes them to the next level and takes them to kind of putting in sort of their experience of digital from where they were to somewhere different. It's kind of growing people organically. It's okay that people move on to new jobs as long as, you know, they've been supported. I think it's a great compliment as a manager if a staff member says, do you know what, I'm leaving for a different banded job. I think I would look at myself and go, do you know what, you've been empowered, you've been given the support, and I'm actually proud that you're moving on.
Job done.
Exactly. Because like you say, this isn't a one person approach, this is a one team, and by one team I mean everybody from supplier, NHS, whichever walk of life you come from. If you are health IT or clinical safety, we're in it together. And I think we need to remember that, because it is actually a really lonely job being a CSO.
No, you're right. And I bang the drum about we need to play together, NHS, independent sector, whoever we are, private, public, we all need to work together. And now is the time. Now is the time for us to do that. It hasn't happened well over the past few years, and we really need to. Sascha, we're coming to the sort of like the end of our time, but I'd like to ask you, what does the next 200 days hold for Sascha Mullen in relation to your role?
Oh, well, I would say I won't tease you. You'll have to tune into my LinkedIn posts, but 200 days, a lot can happen. I think the two things. I mean, for me, there's still a journey of self-discovery, and I'm okay saying that out publicly because I'm human. I think there's still a lot for me to learn. Absolutely, there is. What does it look like? Good question. I'd like to think that within the next 200 days, so at my 1 year mark, that there is some tangible, visible change, or we've progressed things that have been stuck, or we've unlocked things, and that culture is continuing and being nurtured. I think the climate at the moment's not great. We know that every organisation's struggling. So if in 200 days' time we're all still smiling and we're all still doing the best that we can, I think we've won. But I think it's just worth acknowledging that it is tough, and I think we just need to make sure that even though I'm one organisation and yourself, Dean, we are one, and actually I think people just need to continue with networking and reaching out. So by 200 days, I would also have hoped to have increased my network of people that if I'm struggling, I can go, oh my God, I'm hitting a wall. I need somebody else, almost like supervision, to say, can we just have a quick chat about something? Because I think that's really healthy. And I think it's really healthy to do that outside your organisation and outside your industry. So I know, watch this space. I mean, I'm happy to hear from people. If people think, have I tried this or we've done this, drop a message, let me know. I'm always willing to learn. If not, hopefully see our listeners on one of the forums. It'd be great to see people there and, say hi, tell us you've had a listen and give us some feedback. It'd be great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if there's, lastly, Sascha, if there's one takeaway from this session and what we've spoken about, I always put every guest on the spot at the end. What would that be?
My takeaway from this session, I think it's about sharing your story. I think, a lot of us, we look at leaders and we look at peers and we look at people, on social media, and we always think that we don't know much about them. We only know what they tell us. And actually, I think if you are one of these people who is sitting back going, I'm a bit worried about sharing my story, I'm a bit worried about being quite vocal, I would say my takeaway is don't. Because if you can be your true self, you can be professional with that, absolutely. But if you can be your true self, then I think you will get more out of life and more out of work. And that's my attitude. And that's what I'm sticking with. I'm not changing. So like it or lump it, it's me.
Fantastic. Sascha, it's been an absolute pleasure having you join us on The Only Way is Ethics. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And I guarantee you we will be organising part 2 of this session at some point, and we'd love to have you back. Thank you again. And just to remind everyone, thank you for listening. You can find us on Spotify and on YouTube. And thanks for listening. Thanks, Sascha.
Cheers. Bye-bye.